What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto got an alien ninjas pregnant and her clan is coming to Earth? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. It was a dark night. Within the village hidden in the leaves, all was quiet. There was no wind blowing through the leaves or across rooftop. Barely a whisper of a sound, all are asleep. Well, except for one. The sound of a 10-year-old boy slowly breathing as he lay dying in a pool of his own blood. This was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the son of Kushina Uzumaki the Red Death, and Minato Namikaze the Yondaime Hokage and Konoha's Yellow Flash. One might wonder why a boy with such famous parents was in such a state and why there is no one looking or trying to help him. You see, no one knew of Naruto's heritage. They only knew he is the container for the demon that attacked their village a decade ago, the Kyuubi no Yoko. The Kyuubi, known as the most powerful of all the Biju-tailed beasts that took on the form of an animal and were powerful enough to be considered forces of nature, had appeared within their village one night and nearly destroyed it. It was only thanks to Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage and Naruto's father, that the village had been saved. Not by killing it, but by sealing into his newborn son. The villagers wrongly believed that Naruto was the fox trapped in human form. Because of this, Naruto had been beaten many times by civilians who were drunk enough that their inhibitions had dropped. Unfortunately for Naruto, because he was a civilian, the Hokage could only protect him so much. The beatings were particularly bad around his birthday, which happened to be today. A large mob of drunk villagers chase him to an old abandoned building at the westernmost edge of Konoha, next to the Forest of Death. While several others caught the attention of the ninjas by making several fires, and then attacked him weapons of all kinds. An old woman had stabbed him in the eye, and a Inuzuka slap an explosive note on his right arm and activate it. Then after all of them took turns attacking him before one of the ninja made several hand signs and exhale a dozen fireballs. 3 of them hit Naruto while the others hit the surrounding dried wood and support beam, setting them ablaze. And so here he now lay, in a pool of his own blood, cut, stab, burn, and beaten, his right eye missing and his right arm gone, as the burning building slowly collapsed on top of him. In fact, the only thing keeping him alive was the very demon seal inside him. But this was only delaying the invariable. There was too much damage and it could not save him from the flames then consumed the building. But death would not come for Naruto today, as 2 inhuman eyes looked down on him and a pair of cold, lifeless hands picked him up and carried him out of the fire and into the Forest of Death. Where am I? Was Naruto's first thoughts, was he found himself in what could only be called a white void of nothingness. It stretched for as far as he could see, as he tried to figure out where he was when a person appeared before him. She looked about 16 years old and was about 5'8" in height. She had a heart-shaped, held a regal beauty about it, with a soft look. She had smooth, pale white ivory skin, long deep blue hair that reached down to her lower back, and a pair of bangs that framed a beautiful face. The iris, pupil of her eyes were that of pure silver, and was wearing a long white cloak. Naruto felt it would be very easy to mistake her as some kind of Hime princess, or at the very least a rich noble. "Welcome, young Naruto," the pale-skinned girl greeted politely, and Naruto nodded slowly. For some reason he had the feeling that he should be respectful to this girl. "Where am I, and who are you?" Naruto asked after a moment of looking around the void. "We are in a place called the Matrix. As for who am I am called Azure." The now named Azure answers politely. "But why am I here?" the blonde asked, and Azure sighed. "You probably don't remember because of the trauma, but you were attacked by several people." Naruto looked confused before closing his eyes to try and remember, but all he got was flashes. He did however remember losing his arm, but as he looked down he saw that he had both arms. "How?" was his simple question, and the blue-skinned girl smiled. "We are in your mind. You look how you think of yourself, how you think you look. Do you think of yourself with one arm?" Naruto shook his head and Azure smiled again. "Why, you look all right. You were attacked and you did lose an arm. You are here so I can talk to you a little while your body is going through several operations, and my time is almost up." As she finished talking, Naruto's body started to fade away. Naruto looked confused again. "But why me?" he asked one last time, but all he got was a smile before his body appeared altogether. Naruto, he found himself floating in swirling darkness. He was about to call out when a voice that came from seemingly everywhere and nowhere at the same time spoke. A very long time ago a race of technologically advanced being appeared. We were known by many names by many beings, the ancients, the guardians, the wise ones. But by most others and by ourselves, we were called the elders. Naruto saw three beings. They were 7 feet tall with dark blue skin that had white arcane symbols, their arms and legs were thin with long fingers, their heads were stretched back and lastly their eyes were pure black. We use our advanced technology to travel from planet to planet, help other and learning from them. We were always looking into the unknown, always trying to uncover the secrets of the universe. Naruto saw countless other planets and species flash before his eyes, never noticing that he understood a new thing that he shouldn't, that no one from his world should. Soon we found a way to travel between the universes, and so for many millennia we travel, making friends with other technologically advanced races and learning new things. One day we came across a planet that was sealed off from all others with a warning to stay away, but we did not heed the warning, for we were curious as to what lay inside and confident that we could handle anything that might come out. We were wrong. Naruto's eyes winded as he saw the outline of a creature. Its lower body was long and snake-like, its upper body was human-like, it had 4 long arms that end in sharp claws, it had 6 bat-like wings, its head had 3 upward spikes like a crown of some kind, and it had 4 glowing crimson eyes. We had awoken a long-forgotten evil, the creature known only as the Abyss. The two of us fought, for many eons, through many universes, with many allies, did we and the creature battle. Naruto's eyes winded in horror as he saw it flash before his eyes, the war, the death of millions of beings, the destruction of thousands of worlds, the loss of entire universes. We realized that for all our power and wisdom we could not defeat this evil, so we planned to take the evil down with them. We lured the Abyss and its allies to one spot, and activated the most destructive weapon that we had ever made for this single purpose, the neutron bomb. We did not consider that we would survive the blast, but we did. The massive explosion had thrown us into a universe that we never been before, so the elders decided to settle down on a small planet. There we found that the beings on the planet could use a strange form of energy. We called it chakra. After living on the planet for many centuries, the chakra started to change us. Many of the elders begun to sense things beyond the realm of here and now, visions of things to come. Through these visions we see that the great evil was not destroyed like we had hoped, but it was greatly weakened. So the elders decide make a great guardian using the DNA of hundreds aliens. We call it Kaguya. In time she took the form the human female and even had children. Then the Abyss appeared. Kaguya fought the Abyss while we kept its allies back, and we thought we had won as our guardian smashed down the Abyss. But again we were wrong. The Abyss fused itself with Kaguya in one last attempt to survive. We could only watch in horror as our once great guardian was twisted and tainted until it became the beast that would to be known as the Jubi on Yami. It was a beast of chaos, destroying all in its path. As we thought the end was here, 2 men appeared. One was a sage gifted with powerful eyes, and the other was a warrior of great power. They fought the beast for 3 days and 3 nights. Finally the sage was able to seal the beast into himself. Afterwards him came to us to learn how to utilize its chakra and then teach it to others. We watch as the sage, who was nearing death, seal the body of the beast into a stone prison, and then using the last of his strength to split its soul and power into 9 pieces. That would later be known as the 9 Biju or tailed beast. Our time was coming to an end like that of the sage. We had pushed our bodies past their natural limits millennia ago. And now we were reaching the limits of how long our technically could keep us alive. The elders were ready for the end, our time had passed and we were ready for the next life. But our foresight gave us 2 last visions, one of horrors and one of hope. The first vision was that a masked man with curse eyes, together with the help from the allies of the evil one, he gathered the 9 pieces into one and sealed it into his body, becoming one with the beast and resurrecting the Abyss. We had cried, for we thought that all of our work and sacrifice would be for nothing, but our last vision was one of hope. We saw a light chasing away the darkness cast by the masked man. The light then took the form of a young man, whose hair was like the sun and eyes like the sky. He, with the help from one of 9 pieces that was sealed inside him and using the vast amount knowledge we had gathered, slay masked man and his allies, and eradicate the darkness. We knew what we had to do. So through willpower alone we pushed past our limits once more for our final tasks. First we created 3 biological supercomputer with artificial intelligences. We named them Aurora, Azure, and Akane. The last one was to be merged with the Biju sealed inside our light. Second, we created a vast city. This would be his home, his fortress, his sanctuary. Lastly we created numerous machines and smaller bases of all kinds. From factories to make anything he may need to robots that could be used to gather information. And then we linked them together through our eyes. After our tasks were finished we record this for our light and legacy, so that he can learn from our past and prepare for the darkness that is to come. We hope that your heart stays strong through hardship you face, and that your will be unbreakable through even the darkest of days. Here is in Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage stood with a team of Anbu at an old abandoned building at the westernmost edge of Konoha. The area was unfortunately closest to the Forest of Death, thus the amount of occupants in the area was very light. It was for this reason that it took several hours after all the fires had been put out for the Anbu team had finally arrived. However, that was not why the elderly Hokage was standing before the smoldering ashes of all that was now left of the building. No, his reason for being there was due to the bloodstains that had led towards the building from one adjacent to it. Kneeling down and looking from the blood to the building it came from, Sarutobi sighed. The Anbu weren't equipped to deal with fires. Water users wouldn't have been able to do much without a source of water, so the fire had consumed the building entirely. However, they had managed to protect the buildings surrounding it, thus preventing a larger blaze from spreading. But, upon finding the bloodstains, an old fear had grown in the Sarutobi, not for himself, but for someone whom he had grown to care for greatly over the years. Kakashi, where are those test results on this blood? Hiruzen demanded while turning to look at the Jonin, who amazingly enough wasn't reading his little orange book for once in his life. It takes time to analyze something like that, Hokage-sama. But we should have the results soon enough. Just be a little more patient. I'm sure everything is alright. Kakashi replied, and Sarutobi frowned while puffing on his pipe, eyes set in a stern frown before turning to the building. What started the fire? The aged Hokage questioned while looking to the ashes and brick that remained of the old building, glad that at least no life was lost. Well, that wasn't confirmed yet, but he knew the building was abandoned, and hoped that his fears were unfounded. We're not sure, but small traces of chakra were found in the area suggesting a jutsu was used. But given the amount of fire element ninja in the village, that doesn't help us any. Kakashi replied with a frown under his mask while the Anbu searched the rubble of the building, looking for anything from a survivor's remains to clues to help find the culprit who'd set the building ablaze. What about Naruto? What was found at his apartment? Hiruzen demanded, and Kakashi winced under his mask, remaining silent. He honestly didn't want to tell him what was found. The old man was notably soft when it came to Naruto, too much so in many people's opinions, but regardless, Kakashi truly did not want to know how the aged Sandaime would react to what was found. Kakashi, the Sandaime roared out while turning to the one-eyed man, and Kakashi gulped upon seeing his glare. Yes Hokage-sama? Kakashi asked with a mental gulp, and the Sandaime narrowed his eyes onto him dangerously. What was found at Naruto-kun's apartment? The old man demanded, and Kakashi was silent before relenting as the Sandaime's glare increased. We found signs of forced entry and a struggle, a broken window, and what looks like signs of fire jutsu being used nearby. Kakashi admitted, and then winced when he saw the Sandaime clench his fists, his jaw set into a stern frown. And what about his neighbors? Surely someone would have heard the ruckus being made from something like that. The Sandaime growled out, and Kakashi reached up and rubbed the back of his neck, sweating lightly under the Sandaime's glare. Well, some of his neighbors never really saw Naruto in a favorable light, so it seems they ignored the noises. While the others believed he'd hurt himself preparing for or even setting up a prank and thought better of getting involved with it. Given Naruto's track record, you can't blame the latter of them, Hokage-sama. Kakashi explained, then noted, and the aged Sandaime snorted derisively before puffing on his pipe and mulling over what they told him. Sir, an Anbu cried while appearing next to Kakashi and held up a folder. Ah, those test results are finally in, Hokage-sama. Kakashi stated, and the old man walked over to the Jonin as he took the folder from the Anbu, who quickly shunshin away, greatly worrying Kakashi as it silently told him that whatever results the test had given were not good. Well, open it, Sarutobi ordered, and Kakashi slowly nodded his head before opening the folder and read the test results before widening his single eye. What do the results say? Whose blood did that belong to Kakashi? The Sandame demanded, and Kakashi looked to the Sandame numbly for a moment. Naruto Uzumaki? Kakashi whispered and then watched as a stunned look crossed the Sandame's face before he closed his eyes and let out a tired sigh. Turning back to the building for a moment, the old man then clenched his fists. Too long, he said darkly, and Kakashi blinked. What? The silver-haired Jonin questioned, and the Sarutobi turned to him with a deep scowl on his face. Too long, have I allowed the civilians and even the shinobi of my village too much leniency for far too long? Hiruzen replied and then turned back to the ashes of the building, the stern look on his face growing grimmer. If the Shodem or Nidame could see this, they would weep. A child murdered, possibly burned alive, just before the final exams at the Shinobi Academy. Sarutobi stated darkly while Kakashi shook his head and then looked at the report one last time. Hokage-sama, it's still debatable whether or not he's dead. He could still be alive and merely. Kakashi started to say before hearing a cry from the Anbu. Looking to the Hokage, he ran over, the Sandame following at a sedated pace behind the copy nin. Coming to the Anbu, Kakashi looked at him and he bowed his head. We did some scans for more traces of blood and, well. The man left off and Kakashi visibly grimaced before sighing as the Sandame narrowed his eyes. As you were saying, Kakashi? Sarutobi grumbled and the man was silent while the aged Hokage looked to the Anbu. Have you found any sign of the culprit who did this? He demanded, and the Anbu was silent before shook his head, but walking over to some rubble he moved a large wooden plank and pulled out of the ashes what looked like a child's arm. It's badly burned but it still contains chakra, Hokage-sama. It's almost feels like the Kyuubi's. The Anbu reported, and Kakashi shivered visibly, wondering if Naruto had used the demon's chakra and if it had started the fire, while Sarutobi walked over and took the arm. Looking it over for a few moments, he then stopped and allowed the tears he had been holding back to fall from his eyes. Using his robes he wiped away some of the tears before an ominous foreboding feeling that sent an intense chill down his spine. Hokage-sama, is everything alright? Kakashi questioned with his hand on the old man's shoulder, and Sarutobi was silent for a moment before shaking his head slowly. No, Kakashi, I fear that something horrible is coming, something worse than even the Kyuubi. The Sandame replied, not knowing just how true his words really were, while the one-eyed Jonin and Anbu both stared at their Hokage, clearly confused by what he meant. Matrix. Naruto's mindscape. Oh, my head. Naruto groaned as got off of the floor and looked around. He was now in a dank and darkened room that reminded him of a sewer of some kind. In front of him was a colossal gate, nearly 20 times his size and with fairly large steel bars. In the middle was a large piece of paper with the kanji for Fuin, seal, on it. Behind the colossal gate was massive sphere of whirling red energy. Where the hell am I? Naruto muttered to himself, not really expecting an answers, and was surprised to get one. We are in the part of the matrix that links your mind to the seal. Naruto looked into the gate where the voice was coming from. He saw a girl that looked very much like Azure. She looked about 15 years old and was about 5'9" in height. Her skin was a few shades darker than his. She had deep red hair that reached down to her mid-back and spiky bangs. Her eyes were a bright crimson red with slit pupils. And lastly, she was wearing a red kimono that went down to her feet, with 2 slits running down the sides, and a V-neck cut in front, showing a little of her C-borderline D-cup chest. Seal? What seal, and who are you? Naruto asked of the redhead. That, my friend, is very complicated. For you to understand, I have to started from the beginning. As you already know, before the sage died he split the soul and power of the Jubi into 9 pieces. That would later become the 9 Bijus. You also know about how Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha fought for control of the village, and Kyuubi was present for part of the battle under Madara's control. Hashirama was victorious, and Madara was believed to have died. What you don't know is that as powerful Hashirama was, he could not fight Madara and control the Kyuubi at the same time. The girl paused and took a deep breath. So his wife, Mito Uzumaki, had the Kyuubi sealed within herself in order to keep her from attacking the village and out of Madara control. Many years later, when Mito was at the end of her life, she decided to keep Kyuubi seal away and so call her great-granddaughter to have to seal into. The granddaughter was named Kushina Uzumaki, and she was your mother. Naruto's eyes widened in shock and his mouth fell open. But before he could interrupt, the red-haired girl continued. We watch her closely through her life. Watch her become a ninja. Watch her fall in love with Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, and Konoha's Yellow Flash, as well as you, father. Not long afterward she became pregnant with a boy, you. But at the end her pregnancy she and your father were attacked by a masked man, who was able to kidnap your mother and extract the Kyuubi from her, which he used to attack Konoha. After breaking the masked man's control of the Kyuubi, your father and mother sacrificed to seal it inside you. Their last moments were in each other's arms, telling you how much they loved you and how much they regret not being able to be there for you. Naruto stood there for a moment, frozen in shock, before he broke down and cried. Cried for what felt like hours as the red-haired girl held him, whispering sweet nothings to him. Eventually he stopped crying and looked back at the colossal gate and the massive sphere of whirling red energy inside it. Is that the Kyuubi? I thought the Kyuubi was supposed to be a giant fox? The blonde asked in confusion, cocking his head to the left. The red-haired girl giggled at how cute he looked. The Kyuubi isn't really an animal, nor are any of the Biju. They are a semi-sentient mass of energy in the form of an animal. Thought she had no idea of how the Gobi and Hachibi came to look like what they are now. You ask who I was. As you know, your father sealed the Kyuubi inside you, but before that he did something else, something the elders tried to do and failed. He was able to separate the dark essence off the Kyuubi before sealing in you. But the Kyuubi was now no smarter than a normal fox. After Azure rescue you, one of organic supercomputer with an artificial intelligences was merged with the Kyuubi. This created me. I am Akane. Akane finished bowing her head. Naruto stood there looking at her for a long time before walking up to her and held out his hand. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, nice to meet you. Akane gave him a small smile and shook his hand. Location: unknown. Azure sighed as she watched Naruto's body as it went through surgery. It had been over 6 hours since the surgery, 2 hours to replace the eye he lost with cybernetic one and another 4 hours to install the automail, an armored prosthetic arm. They were installing a neural interface in the form of a plug located at the base of the skull, just above where the neck meets the back of the head. This would allow him full access to the matrix. The blue-haired girl sighed again. The recovery from surgery, including the period of time necessary to fully master the use of automail limb, would take some time even with his natural healing and the nanites that she injected in him, maybe up to 6 months. If only I could get into contact with Aurora, she thought as she looked at a controlled terminal which the words, "No signal," on it in large red letters. Azure frowned as she thought back to what had happened. 2 weeks ago she got a message from her older sister, telling her that she had detected an anomaly in her systems and she might be out of touch for a while. Then 3 days later Azure got another message from Aurora telling her that the anomaly she had detected was a virus that was corrupting her systems. She also had sent her a copy the virus's makeup, asking her if could make vaccine for it. She had spent the next week and a half trying to make the vaccine. It was for this reason that Naruto got injured. She was so focused on making the vaccine that she didn't realize that Naruto was being attacked until it was over. And now it looked like Aurora has cut off all communication, probably to stop the virus from spreading to her and the other bases through the network. But this left her with a problem. If she did make a vaccine for the virus, then it would have to be directly delivered to Aurora, and she didn't have a body to get there, nor did she have the necessary equipment to make one for herself. Azure looked back at Naruto. The surgery would be over soon and then training could begin. Location: Konoha. Hokage's tower. Hiruzen Sarutobi marched into the council chambers with a deep scowl, clutching a folder that contained several files in one hand. Narrowing his eyes, the old man walked forward and took a seat. Why have you summoned us, Hokage-sama? We're not supposed to convene again for several weeks. One of the council noted, and the Sarutobi chewed on the end of his pipe with a deep scowl on his face. Last night, an unidentified individual or individuals assaulted and most likely killed one Naruto Uzumaki, without any ambush showing up or anyone noticing before they caused a building to burn down. Hiruzen replied while deeply scowled when he noticed that several of the civilians looked more than a little happy with that bit of information. However, Danzo was actually scowling deeply. This is troubling, Danzo stated aloud and drew the surprised looks of the civilians onto himself. Grunting in his throat, the old man then crossed his arm while leaning back in his seat. If a group of people, even civilians, can kill a child and burn down a building, all without anyone noticing before it was done, this means our security is dangerously lax. Imagine for instance, if they were trying kidnap or kill one of the clan heirs, or even burn down the academy or library. Danzo explained while lacing his fingers together, and the civilians instantly realized why this was a very bad thing. We need to increase security. One suddenly shouted, and Hiruzen grunted while reaching up to rub his temples. That isn't the real problem. The problem isn't that we have little security, but that our ninja are very lax in temperament. Instead of having a hardened force of shinobi able to handle any situation, we have genin and chunin who can't catch a single cat for hours. We have young shinobi and kunoichi who think they don't have to train to actually pass their exams, and what's even worse is that they actually can. Sarutobi shouted furiously, and the civilians backed up in their seats while the old Hokage growled lowly. We've allowed the standards of our shinobi to drop far too much, and I want to know why. The old man demanded of the council, and Hiyashi Hyuga decided he'd be one of the few brave enough, or maybe stupid enough, to do so. Hokage-sama, I believe this occurred after the last war ended and the Kyuubi's attack. Due to the casualties of both, we were in a high need of more shinobi for more missions to finance the repairs to the village. So much so that you authorized the drop in standards at the academy so that we could produce more shinobi. However, you made it to where only a third could pass every year, while the council at the time suggested that the rest be retrained for other duties or could attempt to become shinobi again. Hiyashi replied carefully, and the Hokage nodded his head before frowning deeply. Indeed, now then, can anyone tell me why, after 10 years, we haven't raised the standards back up? We have more than enough shinobi to send out on missions, we have too many for that matter, and too many who think they can do anything they want just because of the fact they passed the shinobi exams. The Sarutobi growled out while glancing around the room, and Danzo actually raised a brow. Is he finally going to fix the mess he's made out of the village? The old man wondered to himself, as while he did wish to lead Konoha, he only really wanted to do so because of how far it had fallen. If it were in proper hands, he was sure they'd still be the top village. Well sir, it allowed many civilian children to pass more easily, whereas before the shinobi roster was packed with nothing but clan children. One of the civilian council responded, and Sarutobi twitched slightly before growling. That's because you civilians never once encouraged them to take being a shinobi seriously. He shouted furiously before leaning forward as several civilians flinched at the normally kindly old man's tone. Do you know that the majority of casualties in the village are from civilian graduates? Or even that the majority of them are dead before they even make chunin? So please explain to me, esteemed council, how it is so many civilian genin have constantly passed, only to end up as little more than cannon fodder? The Sarutobi demanded furiously, and saw them all look nervous and surprised. Why, you can't expect us to control how children act, Hokage-sama. One of the council tried, and Hiruzen slammed a hand into his desk, the object nearly buckling under his surprising strength. While that is true, what I want to know is why the academy psyche evaluations have completely stopped. As I recall, those were necessary to make certain any student who lasted long enough to pass was mentally prepared for the life of a shinobi, so explain to me why they suddenly stopped. The Sarutobi questioned, and saw several nervous glances among the civilian council while several of the shinobi blinked. Wait, hold up, Hokage-sama's right, I haven't gotten an evaluation for Kiba this year. Sume Inuzuka noted with a frown before glaring at several of the civilian council members. And I know for a fact Kiba's ego needs to be taken down a few pegs before he becomes a shinobi. Otherwise he'll just get himself killed. She growled out while several of the other clans nodded, all of them noticing their children's faults but had thought they somehow managed to pass their evaluations. Well, it's just that. One of the civilians tried to say before Danzo decided to explain what had happened. Actually, that occurred after the Uchiha massacre last summer. Several members of this esteemed council felt that overly stressing the students and genin to be perfect would cause them to break mentally, as Itachi did. Danzo replied, though he, Sarutobi, and the elders all knew that wasn't exactly true. Itachi didn't break due to stress after all. Stressing the students, and preparing them for the very real possibility of dying on the field are two different things. Shikaku Nara stated while pinching the bridge of his nose with a frown. The problem with our current standards is that they're learning only the basics of being a shinobi, and the problem with the students themselves is that they don't take being a shinobi seriously until they've lost a teammate on a mission or nearly die. If we raise the standards and reintroduce the psyche evaluations now we might be able to fix some problems. However, the current graduating class would have to be held back, as would several others, to include additional training. Shikaku stated while drumming his fingers on the desk in front of him. But if we do that, Sasuke Uchiha will never pass the psyche evaluation. And we need the Uchiha too. One of them started to say before Danzo scoffed and crossed his arms over his chest. Lineage and bloodlines have aided many shinobi. This is admittedly true, however very few are worth noting. Tsukumo Hitaki was a powerful shinobi without either and was considered to match the Sannin at one time. Minato Namikaze was nothing but an orphan, but he became Yondaime Hokage. Neither Jiraiya nor Orochimaru of the Sannin are from clans, but they are considered great. Out of the Sannin, only Tsunade was ever of a clan, and even then, she couldn't use any of her grandfather's abilities. Danzo retorted while inwardly admitting he did somewhat favor clans, but none of them had truly produced prodigious ninja, as everyone in a clan had the same overall skills. But what about Uchiha Itachi? He was a genius who, one of the civilians started to say, only for Shibi Aburame to cut in. Went insane due to stress, and he rarely ever used his bloodline in battle unless necessary. Shibi responded, shutting several of the civilian council up while Sarutobi chewed on the end of his pipe once more. We have also lost our Jinchuriki, while Kumo, Iwa, and Kiri all have 2 Jinchuriki. And even Suna and Taki has 1 each. Now, thanks to our lack of security and lack of proper shinobi, we've not only lost our own, but the son of the Yondaime no less. Sarutobi barked furiously while glaring at a now fearful civilian council, and several members of the clan council frowned deeply. Son of the Yondaime? One civilian questioned, and all the clans looked at him like he was a complete idiot. How many other ninja have hair that blonde or eyes that blue? Sume demanded incredulously while rubbing her temples, and saw several of the civilian council start to shift uncomfortably while Sarutobi scowled. Exactly, and if there are any spies in the village, we run the risk of them finding out we've lost our Jinchuriki, and that may also cause them to believe that we're weak enough for them to invade. Sarutobi growled out, and Shikaku started to consider their options before frowning deeply. That is bad, really bad. Our little peace with the other shinobi nations is tenuous at best. If they learn we lost our Jinchuriki after we have just the lost Uchiha clan, we might have to worry about an invasion. Shikaku noted with a frown while the civilians seemed confused and even afraid at that tidbit of information. But what does it matter? We're allied to Suna, and Kiri's in the middle of a civil war. And Taki, Kumo, and Iwa don't have any spies in Konoha. A civilian reminded, and Danzo couldn't help palming his face at the sheer stupidity of the civilian council. Just because we don't know of them doesn't mean they're not here. He thought to himself while Sarutobi resisted the urge to groan loudly. Not that we know of, however, given all the confusion during the last Shinobi World War, I wouldn't be surprised if he was slipped in a few spies. And the incident with Kumo and the Hyuga would be a perfect time for them to have left a spy as well. As for the other nations, while we are allied to Suna, they have been losing missions to us thanks to their daimyo, while Taki is currently neutral and most likely won't bother us unless force, and while Kiri is indeed in the middle of a civil war, however I have heard it's starting to shift in favor of the rebels. Sarutobi responded and then leaned back in his seat. So what do you suggest we do, Hokage-sama? Hiyashi questioned of the Sandaime, and the old man reached up and stroked his goatee for a moment before narrowing his eyes. The information about Naruto's status as Jinchuriki is safe, at least for the moment, allowing us at least that bit of protection. However, I feel that we must still raise the standards at the academy regardless, just in case our enemies do learn of our loss of both the Yondaime's legacy, the last of the Uzumaki clan, and the loss of the Kyuubi. Sarutobi replied and then pushed himself out of his seat and gave a look to several members of the council. See to it that the standards are raised and that the evaluations take place. Sarutobi ordered while turning and walking out of the council chambers, allowing the esteemed council to break into chatter. Scowling deeply, the old man then marched up the length of the tower and entered into his office and looked out of his window overlooking Hidden Leaf Village. He remembered a time long past, when he could look out over his village like this to escape stress caused by problems like war, economy, or Orochimaru's strange behavior. Before the Sannin's treachery, before Kyuubi, before all this. He could look out at all of his people, his children, and feel at peace. Sadly, now when he looked out, he could only taste bitterness in his mouth, and his thoughts didn't change, or worse, ended up more troubled than before. Sarutobi couldn't look out on Konoha without being reminded about something important, something he was reminded of every day. His failure. His failure to Naruto, how he was forced into a cruel, uncaring orphanage, how he was banned from entering almost every shop in Konoha, how he was cut off from almost any human contact. They were all his fault. While I might have fixed some things, I'm too late to save others. The Sarutobi thought to himself with a slight grimace before scowling deeply. I'll make certain something like this never happens to any child. The old Hokage decided to himself. Never again would he allow the council to have so much power? Never again would he allow his village to fall so much? Never again would he allow a child to suffer. Hiruzen Sarutobi turned away from his village, as if wishing to hide from his children the tears slowly falling to the floor. Naruto, please forgive me. For last night, for everything. Iruka Amino trudged into the Konohagakure Shinobi Academy. However, the normally chipper schoolteacher looked like hell. The Sandaime had briefed him on the fate of one Naruto Uzumaki the night before, and now he would have to announce the death of the blonde-haired Jinchuriki to his classmates. And what's worse is that we don't know who did it. Iruka added mentally, as there was any number of shinobi villages that would jump at the chance to take out a Jinchuriki. However, the problem was figuring out which village had had this information, as even though it was well known in Konoha, the Sandaime had made it a priority to protect that information from those who were outside of the village. There was another possibility, one that Iruka sick to his stomach and wished that wasn't possible, but he knew that the blonde killer was likely from this very village. Sighing tiredly, Iruka palmed his face lightly while making his way into the classroom, twitching when he heard the ruckus that the students were making. Resisting the urge to swear loudly, the schoolteacher walked over to his desk and slumped into his seat. Letting out a breath, the man then looked to his class and saw them all staring at him strangely. He supposed that wasn't too unusual given how he normally wasn't this tired when he came into class, but he had at least thought they knew he was human. Letting out a breath through his nose, Iruka then sat forward and closed his eyes, trying to think of how he'd break the news to his class. Attention everyone. He started and then twitched upon realizing they were all ignoring him, and thus slammed his hands down and uses his infamous demon head no jutsu. Quiet down already. He shouted loudly and the class was all but instantly silent. The daily ritual complete and a semi-feeling of normalcy returned, the schoolteacher then let out a tired sigh. It seems. Iruka started to say, only to stop as he tried to come up with the right words for the situation. It was at this time that one Sakura Haruno looked to the side and noticed that someone was missing. Iruka-sensei, is Naruto out sick today? Or is he out doing one of his silly pranks again? Sakura questioned of the teacher, and Iruka reached up and rubbed his face tiredly. I only wish he were out pulling a prank on us. Iruka thought to himself before fidgeting for a moment more and letting out a sigh. No, Sakura, he's not pulling a prank, and he's not out sick. Iruka stated bluntly and then took a deep breath before continuing. Class, it seems that the night before last an unknown assailant attacked Naruto. Iruka explained, and Sasuke Uchiha frowned before leaning forward. Why would someone attack the Dobi? The dark-haired youth questioned, and Iruka shook his head with a slight shrug. As of yet, there has been no motives found for why he was attacked. However, what is known as that Naruto put up some kind of fight, and that he was killed by the assailant. The investigations are still going on to see how and why, but thus far, it seems he was caught in the building that caught on fire, and his assailant was either caught with him, or somehow managed to escape the scene. The brown-haired man explained before leaning back in his seat, the students oddly silent as the man then took a deep breath through his nose and exhaled. Sensei? Sakura asked, seeing tears welling in the man's eyes as he then looked back at his students. Finally, the Hokage himself will be funding and hosting a funeral for Naruto this weekend. The brown-haired man explained to the class and then turned his seat so he could grieve for a moment longer. That is all. Converse amongst yourselves for a moment. Class will begin as usual after a brief recess. Iruka then said while letting out a breath and trying to calm himself down a little, though he somewhat doubted he'd be able to, while the students started to speak to one another about the disturbing news. Among all of them, the most shocked seemed to be Sakura herself, while Sasuke was scowling deeply and narrowing his eyes. Why would someone sneak into the village, kill the Dobi, and then leave? It doesn't make any sense. Something is going on here. Sasuke mentally decided while lacing his fingers together and contemplating the possibilities of what was going on. Meanwhile, Sakura merely gaped and stared towards where Iruka was sitting, a disbelieving look on her face. Naruto's dead? She mentally questioned and then rapidly shook her head while looking to the empty seat in class. But he was just here a few days ago, how can he be gone? The pink-haired girl wondered to herself while looking to the empty seat, and Yamanaka Ino slipped from her seat and touched the girl's shoulder. Sakura? She questioned, and the pinkette yelped before looking to her and blushing embarrassedly. Are you okay? Ino questioned of her worriedly, and Sakura quickly shook her head and shrugged the other girl's hand from her shoulder. Of course, why wouldn't I be okay, Ino pig? Sakura retorted and looked away while Ino looked at her for a moment. I mean, it's just annoying old Naruto, who cares if he's gone? Sakura then said with a shrug, seemingly unaware of the crack in her voice and the tears forming in her eyes. Just means I don't have to worry about him asking me out or bugging me all the time anymore. She then stated with a slight crack, and Ino merely looked at her for a moment before mentally sighing. Yeah, whatever you say, Sakura, whatever you say. Ino responded while returning to her seat, then grimaced upon seeing a strange look on one Hinata's face. Sakura's taking it bad, Hinata is far, far worse. Ino thought to herself, and then saw the scowl on Sasuke's face and wondered what the dark-haired boy was thinking about that was making him so angry. Location: unknown. Date: unknown. Naruto groaned as he woke up and opened his eye. His body felt like it had been thrown off a cliff and put back together. Looking up, he had to stop himself from screaming as he saw Azure's semi-transparent form floating a few feet from him. Ghost! Yelling the first thing that came to him as he tried to get away. Unfortunately for him, his body was still under the influence of the anesthesia, and so flung himself off the bed and fell face first on the floor. Azure stared at him blankly as he moaned and tried to get up, new waves of pain stabbing him like knives. You shouldn't be moving so much after you just woke up from surgery, my master. Surgery, master? He repeated confusedly, and it was only when he looked down and saw his metallic right arm did he remember the attack. After a moment of silence, as Naruto looked up at her and said in a voice swirling with emotions. Why? There were many possibilities as to what he was asking and what the answer could be. Why did they attack me? Why did you save me? Why don't I have any family? But as she looked down into the lone, blue eye of the child before her, Azure knew that the question he was asking was, why do they hate me? And she knew that he was not ready for the truth. Azure could not lie to her master, but why has many possibilities, and she was going to tell him what he needed to know. Your father was Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage. Azure stopped to let it sink in. She saw the emotions play across child's face. Joy and awe at finding out who his father was. Sorrow at the fact that he is dead. And confusion as to why everybody hated him when his dad was a hero. The Kyuubi attacked the night you were born. Azure continued. It was sudden and without warning. The Kyuubi is a Biju, a creature of pure chakra that cannot be killed by weapons and jutsu. Your father had to seal it away in order to stop it. A normal object could not be used without preparation, and it had to be a person, a young child. So your father had to use a child, and would not ask another for theirs, and would not trust any other with such a burden. He believed in you. Naruto looked down as tears leaked from his eyes. He felt embarrassed about crying in front of this pretty lady. After several moments in which Naruto used to get control over himself and wipe away his tears, the blonde looked up with a determination burning brightly in his eyes. What do we do now? The new cybernetic ninja asked fiercely. Rehabilitation, and thought Azure said it in an emotionless tone. Naruto felt a shiver of dread. 1 week later, it had been a week since the announcement of the death of Naruto Uzumaki, a full week of many adults celebrating his loss. Currently, those who had known the blonde best and a few of his classmates were leaving the graveyard, his modest funeral having only just ended. Not many had actually come: the Ichirakus, the Sandame, Iruka, a man with gravity-defying silver hair, Sume Inuzuka and her children, Shibi Aburame and his family, the Hinata Hyuga, and surprisingly her father, Sasuke Uchiha, and Sakura Haruno being the bulk of the group of few mourners. Unsurprisingly, Hinata and her father were the only ones still there, A blank look on Hinata's face as looked down, while a scowl marred Hiyoshi's features, several dark clouds hovering in the sky, seemingly threatening the world as they hovered up above. Narrowing his eyes on the grave, Hiyoshi ignored Hinata as sorrow and angry swirl in him. Someone killed the son of the fourth Hokage, and everyone starts celebrating? Have we fallen so much? Hiyoshi thought to himself before turning and walking out of the graveyard with a deep scowl across his face. Hinata, however, just continued to stare for a few moments longer. Soon shaking her head, the girl started to walk towards her home in something of a daze. The effect of the blonde's loss had hit those who knew him pretty hard. Hinata had seemed to retract even further into her shell. Iruka didn't seem to pay attention to class anymore. Sasuke seemed to brood more often, though that was normal, and the Ichirakus didn't open up shop as often, not to mention charged more. The most significant change, however, was in the Sandaime, who had started to crack the whip in the village. And all in the village were sure that soon enough all would fear the wrath of their Kage again. Location: Konoha. Hyuga clan compound. Date: NA October 17, 10:12, 5:30 p.m. Hinata paced around her room. She had done his since Naruto's death. She couldn't believe he was dead. Maybe she was in denial or crazy. Hinata stopped, paced, and walked over to a small chest next to her bed but hesitated. Inside was a strange necklace. It was made of dozens of small stones of several different kinds. A few normal rocks, some were black or white marble, and even a few lesser gemstones like jade, amber, and garnet. Naruto had made it for her birthday. He had gone all over the village collecting each stone. They were all different shapes and sizes. It was one of her most treasured possessions. Hinata opened the small chest and took it out. Its most unique feature was an ornate glass disc the size of her palm with a black swirl engraved on it. It was the only part of the necklace that Naruto don't make himself. He had on to her father for help and the two of them had crafted it. It had two special seals on it. The first allow the glass disc to change color depending on a specific person's mood. The other seal allows a little needle on the disc to act as a compass and point to a specific person. Both the seals were linked to Naruto. He and her father and had made it back when the blonde had been homeless and Hinata could never find he. Despite having several servants with the Byakugan helping her look for him. Hinata looked down at the necklace in her hand, wishing her could channel chakra into it and find Naruto alive and happy. Closing her eyes and sending chakra into the precious gift, she allow herself a moment of selfness, to believe that it will light up and show her the way to the hyperactive blonde training or setting up one of his infamous pranks. After a few moments she opened her eyes and let out a gasp. The crystal swirl had lit up a fire orange color and the needle was pointing south. Hinata sat there for several minutes frozen between wonder, disbelief, and hope before coming to her senses. The Hyuga heiress gave herself a hard pinch on the arm to make sure she wasn't dreaming or under a genjutsu. You never know, and when nothing happened she was convinced that it was real. Hinata looked back down at the necklace as several thoughts raced through her mind. How can he be alive if they found his arm? Maybe it was a cover-up or a story made by the Hokage to get Naruto away from the villagers. But what if, the pale-eyed girl started to pace back and forth, still clutching the stone chain as her thoughts turned to dread. What if he's been kidnapped or escaped from his attackers and is lying in the dirt bleeding or... Hinata froze, unwilling to think of the horrors that the blonde might be in. Instead she grabbed her backpack and started to fill it with things she thought she might need, an extra change of clothes. If it took several days to find him, her savings, 5,000 yen, in case she had to buy thing on the way, and some other things from around her room. Realizing that she was going to need ninja tools made Hinata hesitate. The only place she knew where to give some was a small room near the dojo, and while she was allowed to get equipment from it, if Neji or someone from the main house found her stuffing her bag. Shaking her head, Hinata grabbed her backpack and slowly left the room, using her Byakugan to make sure she didn't meet anyone on the way. Once inside the storage room she collected what she needed, a set of kunal and shuriken, a med kit scroll, a scroll of rations, a 50-feet roll of ninja wear, and lastly 10 explosive tags. Closing the door, Hinata turned around and came face to face with a member of the main house. Her heart stopped for a moment before she realized who it was. Kikyo was several years older than Hinata and one of the few who stood up for the branch house, having once challenged an elder for using the curse seal on a branch house girl who spilled his tea. Good evening, Hinata-san. Kikyo gave a bow, her eyes sweeping from the door to the backpack in the young girl's hands. "Good evening, Kikyo-san," Hinata said in what she hoped was a calm voice as she returned the bow. "Is there something you need?" Kikyo studied her for a long moment before answering, "Yes. Hiyashi-sana has sent a message from the Hokage's tower. He will not be able to attend dinner tonight." Hinata nodded. She wasn't surprised. He and the other clan heads have been having a lot of long meeting for the past few days. Thank you, Kikyo-san. I'll be in my room for the rest of the day. Please tell the others not to me." Kikyo gave her a long searching look. "Very well." She walked to the end of the hall before turning around. "Be safe, Hinata-chan," and disappeared around the corner. Hinata stood there frozen for a few seconds before bolting to her bedroom, locked the door and barely dared to breathe, but after 10 minutes she started to calm down. Then she double-checking her supplies and equipment. The indigo hair heiress opened the window and left. Sneaking past the guards was easy, having Lin Hao from Naruto years ago, and so she followed the seal for about 20 minutes before coming to a stop. Hinata had come to Konoha's red light district, full of brothels, bars, and other shady and sinful places that even the Hokage seemed to turn a blind eye to. And while the young Hyuga had never gone inside, she was familiar with the sight, Naruto's apartment being just 2 blocks away. Hinata made her way carefully through the alleyways and street. The red light district had thugs, thieves, pickpockets, muggers, card sharps, thimble riggers and assorted lowlife, not to mention the packs of greedy merchants who were the worst of the lot. However, as she walked forward they drew back looking weary. Perhaps they knew better than to mess with a Hyuga. Getting the feeling that she should leave as soon as possible, the young heiress sped up, jumping over several garbage cans and barley, noticing bumping into a scantily clad kunoichi as she ran toward the edge of the village. 10 minutes later Hinata found herself looking through a 10 feet high barbed wire fence into the ominous forest that lay beyond. She had followed the tracker seal through the red light district and several small training grounds until she came to this. Looking around for a few minutes, Hinata came across a large, chain shunt gate and a billboard telling her what this dreadful place was. Training Ground, 44. Someone had painted Forest of Death below that, and Anko's Playground below that. Founded in NA 966 by the second Hokage. Information. This training area is filled with a variety of dangerous plants and animals from all over the Land of Fire. Hinata swallowed nervously. She had heard of the Forest of Death from older shinobi of the dangers it held. "Oh Naruto, what happened to you? Please be okay." With that though, she gathered all her courage and hopped on the billboard and over the fence, never looking back, and never noticing that she was being watched through narrow eyes. Location: Konoha's red light district. Date: NA October 26, 10:12, 5:30 p.m. Anko Mitarashi was in a good mood, having spent the morning making Iruka uncomfortable and embarrassed with her flirting, and having had lunch with her friends Kirill and Hana, who had just got back from a mission in the Land of Grass. Stretching the purple-haired Jonin gave a lazy yawn while thinking of that she should do next. It's too late for a mission, but too early to go to the bar. I think I'll go visit the brat. Yeah, if the knucklehead spent too much time alone with Azure, he's likely to go insane. Sniggering silently to herself at the thought of the blonde's slowly diminishing sanity, Anko made her way towards the training grounds, absently noticing the looks of disgust and loathing the villagers were giving her. The short-tempered kunoichi had grown so used to the looks people give her because of her former sensei, but since the blonde's apparent demise, the civilian villagers have grown more bold of their dislike for her. Ironically, it seemed to have the opposite effect on the shinobi, who seemed to be ashamed of how they were acting towards said supposed to be dead blonde. Anko's thoughts of karma and guilty consciousnesses was interrupted, however, when someone roughly bumped into her. The short-tempered Jonin's first instinct was to give this person a few new holes, but stopped when she seen that not only was it a young girl but that it was a Hyuga. The fact that a young Hyuga girl was running around Konoha's red light district without a guard or someone was so utterly bizarre as to awaken every ounce of curiosity that purple-haired kunoichi possessed, and so she followed. 10 minutes later and mystery deepened, for Anko thought she knew who this girl was. She couldn't be sure, for all the Hyuga looked so damn it alike. She remembered Kirill intruding her to a shy, young girl who turned out to be the Hyuga heiress, who was now in front of the last place on earth that anyone would believe, the Forest of Death. Anko watched the girl hesitate by the gate, Apparently the dreadful rumors of the Forest of Death frighten even the high and mighty Hyuga clan. For a few moments before jumping over them and into the forbidden forest beyond. Anko followed the Hyuga princess for a few hours as she made her way deeper into the deadly woods. Finally, after it became too dark to see where you were going safely, even with the Byakugan, did the girl stop and make camp. Watching her set up her tent, the snake summoner couldn't help but be impressed by the young girl. She had set up her tent inside of a hollow space high up in one of the giant trees, covered the entrance with a camouflage sheet, and set up a trap. The trap was a simple one using some ninja wire and an explosive tag. It wouldn't work on anything above a genin, but it was enough for any creature that might sniff her out. Making a shadow clone to keep watch over the girl, Anko headed for the tower, sure that Azure would want to know about the Hyuga heir's sudden desire to go camping as the some bloodthirsty forest as the blonde. Anko had to stop tree hopping for a moment as the answer hit her with the force of a rampaging pervert. It's the blonde. I should have known. Kirill told me that the girl had a crush on the idiot, and now that think about it I remember seeing her stalking high. Realizing the important and potential danger of this situation, Anko shunshed straight to the tower's entrance, throw open the door and run down the stairs before stopping at the last floor. Pausing for a moment to catch her breath and slow her heart, Anko looked down the hallway. It was long and plain, about 200 feet long with no doors and a dead end. She walked down the hallway carefully with even steps. On the 65th step she turned abruptly to her right and without hesitation walked right through the apparently solid wall. The wall shimmed and ripped like molten silver as she stepped through before returning to its normal appearance. Anko suppressed a shudder. She hated walking through the nanowall. It made her skin crawl. Looking around, she had stepped into a small square room, empty and doorless. And after a moment of waiting, the unmistakable cool and calm voice of Azure filled the room. Good afternoon, Anko-san, how may I assist you? Take me to the control room, Alpha Priority. We have a big problem. There was a pause before Azure replied, yes, access granted. Transrings activation in 10 seconds. Anko stepped swiftly to the center of the room as 4 massive rings raised up around her, and in a blinding flash was gone. The purple-haired Jonin reappeared moments later several hundred feet underground. Around her were more than a few strange things not seen in the shinobi nations. First, the wall on the right was covered in a dozen crystalline video screens, each one have a live video from a different part of Konoha. There was also several high-tech medical equipment. But the strangest thing in the room was the supposed to be dead blonde preteen, who was apparently too busy vomiting to notice the arrival of the purple-hair woman. Anko, on the other hand, had noticed the blonde immediately and turned to the hologram of Azure, which had materialized on her left. What's wrong with the brat? He looks like he just seen Mike Guy naked. The blue-haired hologram shook her head. Master is suffering detoxification from his diet of large quantities of high-sodium enriched noodles. Anko's face was blank for a few seconds before her brain translated his into something that made sense. Wahahaha. You mean to tell me that brat is going through ramen withdrawal? She doubled over in laughter. Naruto stopped puking and wiped off his face, giving the snake summoner a look of deepest loathing while Azure continued like nothing was going on. As you can see, he is having trouble keeping down the nutrient supplement I have prepared for him. She gestured to a tall glass of greenish liquid that looked like the contents of a salad that someone tried to blend. Out of curiosity, Anko put her finger in green slurry and gave it a try, only to gag from the flavor of cabbage, grass, and tomato all rolled in one. Azure waited for the nearly nude Kunoichi to stop retching before continuing. You have something important to tell us? You used an Alpha Priority command. Anko took a deep breath and straightened up. We have an intruder in Sector S12. It's the Hyuga heiress. At this, Naruto sat up and looked around. I found her in the red light area and followed her. She walked through in almost a straight line. She also moved through the forest in a straight line, and seems to be following a compass on some kind of jeweled necklace. Silence followed these words as they thought of what they should do. Finally Azure spoke up. Anko, in the morning try to frighten her off. If she put resistant, try using genjutsu or TR. No. The two female turned to Naruto, who was embarrassed. HRR. I mean, I trust Hinata, we've been friends for years. I know she would want to help me with my plan if I ask. And what is your plan? The purple-haired Kunoichi asked curiously. In the 2 weeks the young Jinchuriki have been here, he has been very quiet. Anko, who had kept an eye on him over the years, knew this was not normal. Naruto didn't answer her. He had thought about what he was going to do, thinking of his past and potently futures, and who the villages had scorned his life and celebrated his supposed death. He didn't know if it was from Azure neuro training or from the fact that he real could do anything else at the moment, but he had able to focus and concentrate on one thing at a time, and he had a lot of time to think about what he should do. After a long moment, Azure asked, "Master, what do exactly you plan to disclose to Hinata Hyuga?" Naruto frowned. He wasn't sure of what he should reveal to her, but he was certain that he wasn't going to tell her everything, at least not yet. The preteen knew that the entire Kyuubi, aliens, chosen one thing would be too much for the pale-eyed girl. He knew she was prone to fainting if surprise or frightened. Looking up at Azure and Anko, the recovering blonde let out a deep breath. "I'm not sure of what to tell her. I really don't want to tell her about the whole Kyuubi, Jinchuriki thingy." And so for the next few hours the three of them talked and argued over what to tell the Hyuga princess, what not to tell her, and how to tell her. Location: Konoha. Hokage's Tower. Date: NA October 27, 1612, 1:15 a.m. Hiruzen Sarutobi let out a tired sigh as the council meeting ended. Glancing at the clock above the door showed him that it was 1:15 in the morning. His stiff muscles and old bones groaned in protest as he got up from his chair and made his way to his office to clean up before heading off for some much-needed sleep. As the old cage put away scrolls and stray papers, his mind went over the meeting. It had lasted so long because of an argument over the new requirement for the academy students to have to know Kenjutsu or another weapon skill to become a genin. While some didn't care one way or another, Inoichi, or found it too troublesome to care, Shikaku, Shibi and Choza were all for it. On the other hand, Sume was against it. The Inuzuka argued that her clan's claws and fangs were just as good as any weapon and they had their ninkin, and while Hiyashi himself had no problems, he said that the Hyuga elders were fuming, stubbornly said that the gently fist-made weapon skills useless. The Hokage shook his head. The Hyuga elders' pride would be their downfall one day. Then this thoughts moved to something much more concerning. Hana Inuzuka had returned from a mission in the Land of Grass and reports that the county was quickly becoming unstable, which confirmed the information he got from Jiraiya. 3 months ago the daimyo of the Land of Grass died under mysterious circumstances, but the real problem was that the daimyo had twin sons Kaichu and Hiru, and hadn't named an heir. Kaichu had seized control and had his brother exile. However, Hire had a lot of friends in and out of the Grass County and started gathering more support. Jiraiya's spies had informed that a full-out civil war was likely in the next 8 to 10 months. This could be both a good and bad thing for Konoha. The Leaf Village was likely to get more missions. When the Land of Water began its civil war, Konoha missions increases by 30%. However, the Land of Grass was the largest exporter of herbs and medicine, including several rare plants that can be found onwhere else. Hiruzen let out another tired sigh as he sealed the last shelf before heading off for bed, and as he laid down his mind drift to Naruto, and for the 100th time he wondered what he could have done. "I swear to you, I will make the right choices and not just the easy ones." The third Hokage closed his eyes. Location: Konoha. Hyuga Clan Compound. Date: NA October 27, 1612, 1:30 a.m. Hiyashi walked through the Hyuga compound. Despite the late hour and the tiring meeting he had to endure, neither his body nor his face betray the fatigue he felt. The Hyuga were masters of reading body language and he couldn't afford to look weak at any time. You never knew how was watching. Hiyashi made his way to his room while avoiding the elders, who obviously wanted to know all about the meat and the Hokage's chews. Quickly stepping inside, he turned and locked the door and activated the special seal that prevented the Byakugan from seeing through the walls. It was the same seal that all members the main house had over their rooms, just one more thing to hold over the branch house heads. As the Hyuga head turned around, he saw his younger daughter curled up asleep next to his desk, and his expression softened a bit. Hiyashi was as cold and heartless as most people believe. He had fought against his father and the other elders for most of his life, first for his brother being branded with the curse seal and then for his wife, Hitomi. Hiyashi closed his eyes, just thinking about her caused him pain, which was why he tried not to look at his daughter. Hinata was so much like her mother in looks and personality. Hitomi had been quiet and shy, never speaking unless she was certain and choosing her words carefully, but she also had a hidden strength and an iron will, with the skills in gentle fist that rivaled that of any main house member. He had often called her, the silk-sheathed sword, a name that stuck to her. His wife had been born in the branch house. He had fought with the elders for several years before they were allowed to get married. The next few years were wonderful. The Third Shinobi War ended. Minato was named the fourth Hokage and got married. His brother had a son that he named Neji, and he found out that his wife was pregnant and that the other clan heads was also having heirs. Then the Kyuubi attacked. In that one night Hiashi lost so much. His mother who had supported him against the elders, his brother lost his wife, and Minato and his wife died. The Hyuga head was devastated. He had been friends with the blonde genius for years, having gone through the Chunin exam with him, and fought beside him in the war. The two of them had planned to renounce the cursed seal with the help of Kushina, a member of the now nearly extinct clan. Now that dream was gone, dead before it could be born. In that darkest hour a light appeared. Hitomi gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. They named her Hinata, because she was their sunny place in that dark time. Then disaster struck once again. At first it seemed as if things were improving. Kumo, who had continued to fight with Konoha after the end of the Third Shinobi War, had finally called for a truce. It was a trick. The head ninja of Kumo who had come to sign the treaty tried to kidnap Hinata. He had acted on instinct, killing the man before he could escape. This began what is now called the Hyuga incident. Konoha was furious. They wanted an explanation and payment for breaking the treaty. Kumo denied knowing anything about the kidnapping and demanded compensation for the death of their head ninja. They wanted the dead body of the man who killed him. The wanted Hiashi Hyuga. Of course Konoha rejected what was obvious, another attempt to try to get the Byakugan, and so the fighting continued. Only fiercer and bloodier than before. At first Hiashi was all for it. He sent members from both houses and he and his brother fought in the front lines. But after 6 months it became all too clear to him that more fighting would accomplish nothing but more bloodshed and pain, and so he prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. Hizashi and the elders had other plans. The elders didn't want to give in to Kumo's demands or put the curse seal on him and have it fail. The seal had a high chance of failing if it is put on someone after a certain age. So his father Hokori talked Hizashi into giving up his life for the greater good. Hiashi's brother said that it was his choice and their father wasn't forcing him, that he was happy to die to protect one of this precious people. The only thing he asked was that Hiashi give his son a letter that he had written to him at the right time. Hiashi was brought back to the present when someone knocked on his door cautiously. He opened the door. On the other side was Kikyo, which made him warier. The Hyuga leader always felt wary around her, like she was watching his every move and not like the Elder Watch or other maid house members watch him. Hiashi just couldn't figure her out. She didn't want to control him like the elders nor use him like the other maid house. She was a complete mystery. Even her fighting style was strange. She used 2 ornate daggers with wind chakra. It even earned her the name, the Wind Knife. The Hyuga head had mixed feelings about her. She had helped and cared for Neji after his father's death and did the same for Hinata, and for that he was grateful. But Hiashi was a ninja, and as such his senses were screaming at him that young lady in front of him was very dangerous. Kikyo gave him a faint smile. "I've come to tell you that the elders wish to have a meeting with you." Hiashi's eye only twitched slightly. "Tell them that I will schedule a meeting with them tomorrow afternoon." The pale-eye woman nodded and turned to leave but stopped short. "Hinata-san did not eat with the main house tonight. She is not feeling well and I don't think she will wish to be disturbed tomorrow." Hiashi couldn't completely suppress a wince as Kikyo left. He could endure the elders' threats and insults, but her words seemed to cut right through him just as easy as her knives. Location: Konoha. Underground compound. Date: NA October 27, 1612, 2:10 a.m. Danzo Shimura walked through the underground maze beneath Konoha with ease in spite of its complex and dimly lit passageways. As he rounded a corner 2 shadows moved on either side of him. The old warhawk nerves slowed or paused despite the ruthless assassins following him. He knew that it was Fu Yamanaka and Torun Aburame, his most loyal ninja. As Danzo stepped into his camber and sat down behind a simple desk, he thought about the blows that Konoha had taken recently. First was the loss of the Uchiha clan. The root leader knew that it would take years to recover the military strength. Next was the lost Itachi Uchiha, who had ruthlessly slaughtered his clan and fled branded as a traitor. But the truth was that he was ordered to do it to stop the Uchiha from starting a war. And lastly was the loss of Naruto Uzumaki, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko. The only good thing to come out of this was that the boy's death seemed to fire back into Hiruzen, who was now the strong figure that Konoha needed in its weakened state. Danzo frowned as he thought about his old rival. He knew that there were things that the third would not do. He would have to send out root members to search for and seal the Kyuubi as soon as it reforms. If another village get a hold of it, especially Iwa or Kumo, then the balance of power could shift greatly against Konoha. He would also need one to watch Itachi's younger brother to see if the boy follow in his father's footsteps. The old warhawk thought silently for several moments before turning to Fu. How is my grandson's training? Fu bowed. Sai is finished his basic training and is ready for his final test. Danzo nodded. The final test was when two root trainee battled to the death. It was to purge what was left of their emotions, but he had a new mission for his young grandson and it will be better if he had them, for now. Turning to the other root ninja, Torun, tell my grandson that he will not be taking the test and that I have a mission for him. Torun bowed and shunshin away. Danzo sighed heavily as he started to go through the files of his root ninjas. He would have to find the best suited for long-term missions in Iwa and Kumo. And it done. I'm so sorry for not updating, but a lot has happened to me. My computer broke, I lost my job, been homeless, and everything. I still don't have a computer, so no updates anytime soon, but I will keep writing when I can. I would like your thoughts on what Naruto's planet should be called. Here are a couple of ideas. He moved through the forest like a shadow in the night, swift, silent, and unseen. He knew that it was reckless and foolish for him to return to the village so soon, but he had to know if the rumors were true, and with the network down he couldn't contact Azure. So he was left with one choice, to go to Konoha and see Azure himself. Luckily the Forest of Death was one of the outermost training grounds and only lightly patrolled. As he made his way, Itachi had to hide beside a tree to avoid two patrolling Chunin. And we have guard duty in the morning. Well, it beats patrolling, Azumo, the other Chunin said. This place gives me the creeps, and they say that crazy woman Anko Mitarashi lives in this place and that she cut off guys' balls and eat them. The Raven Summoner's lips twitched slightly. He had met Anko a few times. The last was over several years ago when she was still a student of Orochimaru, and despite the shock of his betrayal, Itachi couldn't imagine the happy if somewhat eccentric young women as some creepy balls-eating psycho. Hopping over the fence, he made his way swiftly through the fatal forest and to the tower at its center. When he got to the transporter room, a cool female voice said, "Please state your passcode." This wearied the mass murderer more than anything. Azure normally know he was coming long before he got to this room, but he spoke his code anyway. Itachi Uchiha, Nevermore 513. There was a few seconds of silence before Azure voice answered. Welcome Itachi. You are not due to be back for another 4 months, why have you returned? Well, at least some things never change. Itachi thought of Azure's bluntness before answering. I have come to verify some rumors that I have heard. I wouldn't have come, but the network is down and that had me wearied. There was a moment pause before the AI answered. Very well, prepare to be transported to the control room. Itachi nodded and stepped forward as the giant rings rose up and he disappeared in a flash of light. The missing ninja reappeared in a large room. To the right was several video screens, to the left was several high-tech machines, and in the middle was the reason he had snuck back into Konoha. Itachi was glad that the blonde Hellraiser was live and in one piece, if only he knew. But what caught his eye was the young woman pass out next to him. It was none other than Anko Mitarashi. She had changed so much that he almost didn't recognize her. She had filled out and was wearing next to nothing. The holographic form of Azure flared to life next to him. We have much to discuss. Naruto awoke to find a weight leaning on him and tried to shove it off, only to knock it on top of him. The blonde Jinchuriki groaned and opened his eyes for a moment to see what the hell was on top of him, only his see a mass of purple hair. Get off of me, Habine. He tried to shove her off again, but his right hand landed on the wrong place. Anko moaned, not so rough, Lemon-kun. Naruto, confused, looked up to see that his right hand was groping Anko's chest and turned a bright red. The blonde gave a yap and threw the Jonin off the bed with surprising strength. A light laugh interrupted the two's fight. The pair spun around to see a man standing in the shadows, but before they could do anything, Azure appeared in the middle of the room. Let me introduce you to one of my top agents, Itachi Uchiha. The Raven Summoner got the reaction he was expected from Anko, which was to go pale and pull out a kunal, but he what did not expect was for Naruto to jump up, point at him and yell, "I know you. You're Sasuke's brother, the one that the other Anbu called the Emo Prince." Akane roar with laughter in Blonde's mind. How does he know that's what the other Anbu used to call me behind my back? Itachi thought as both the adults and the holographic avatar turned to look at Naruto, who scratched at the back of his head in embarrassment. As I was saying, Azure said, getting their attention, Itachi is one of my top agents and has agreed to train you and Hinata if she is willing. It appears that she has awakened. Anko, can you lead her here? Anko nodded silently and Shinshin away. Hinata woke up confused and wounding where she was before she remembered, and a sudden thought crossed her mind. I hope father don't realize that I'm gone. What if he sent out a search team? The shy girl image, what kind of trouble she would be in if that happens. Pushing those thoughts away, Hinata packed up and took out the necklace and set off in the direction it pointed. It took her almost an hour. She had to go around a pack of giant leeches and a very large carnivorous plant. At last, this is where Naruto must be, Hinata thought as she made her way to the base of the tower. At the entrance, Hinata found her way blocked by a mystery's woman. She wore an tan skirt, a black shirt with a long trench coat, but what unsettled the Hyuga heiress most was the Anbu-like mask with purple marking in the style of a snake. The mask woman was silent for a moment before saying 4 words that shocked Hinata more than anything. He's waiting for you. And without looking back or saying another word, she turned and walked into the tower, and after a moment's hesitation the pale eye girl followed after her. Hinata followed the Anbu look-alike through the tower and down several flights of stairs, always 9 feet behind her, not too far to lose sight of her if she makes a sudden turn, but not too near for a surprise attack. On the last floor, the masked Kunoichi walked to the middle of the hallway before turning and going right through the wall. The indigo hair girl froze before activating her Byakugan and saw that it wasn't a genjutsu like she thought, but that the wall seemed to be burning and shimmering. Hinata nervously put her hand on the wall. It sunk through with a slight ripple effect, and stepped through. On the other side she gave a great shudder. It felt like being covered in maggots or ants. Looking around, the room was empty but for a large ring painted on the floor. The masked woman stood in the middle of the ring and beckoned her forward. Hinata took a deep before stepping forward. The rings rose up at once and they disappeared in a flash of light. The two reappeared several hundred feet below the surface in a small room, and Hinata immediately fell to one knee and tried to keep from vomiting at the sensation of being pressed through a very tight, spinning tube. I'm sorry for your discomfort, Hinata-sama. Local solar activity is interfering with the transporter ring stabilizers, but the electromagnetic interference should be gone in 2 hours' times, said a calm feminine voice. Hinata looked up at the sound of the voice and froze at the sight before her. The transparent woman seemed to read her mind. I am not a ghost or a genjutsu or hallucination. What you see before is my holographic avatar. I use to interface with people. A hologram is a 3-dimensional form created by light. Now if you will follow me, my master is waiting for you. Confused and a little overwhelmed, Hinata nodded even though she only understood about half of what the woman said, and followed her into a large room. Stepping inside, the pale eye girl didn't notice the advanced machinery or the video screens. All she saw was the familiar blue eyes and blonde hair of her best friend. Naruto-kun. Hinata launched herself on Naruto's bed and hugged him tightly. The bionic blonde gave a yelp of surprise at the sudden contact, not expecting it from the normally shy girl. Naruto-kun, what happened? They told us that a missing ninja snuck into the village and attacked you. They said that they found your arm, that you were dead. Naruto opened his mouth to tell her what happened but no sound came out. But it was enough to draw her attention to his face, and she noticed that one of his eyes was not the cerulean blue that she was familiar with but a metallic silvery blue. Quickly looking down, she saw that his right arm was the silvery gray of metal. Naruto-kun, Hinata said weakly, before, to everyone but Naruto's surprise, she passed out. Perhaps the transporter rings had a greater malignant effect on her than I calculated, Azure theorized. With that, Anko burst into laughter and Itachi shook his head. Dream, flashback 5 years ago. The snow was drifting down in Konoha, which was already covered in white. In the middle of town there was a big winter festival. Practically everybody was there, but off a distance near a lake there was a 6-year-old girl with pale eyes and around her were 3 older boys. What's wrought, white eye freak? The largest boy said, making the girl cry. No one likes you, why don't you run back to your mommy? Hey, leave her alone, you cross-eye ass. All four turn around to see a blond boy with whisker marks wearing a white shirt with the hidden leaf symbol on it and black pants coming out of the trees. Hey look, it's the other freak. The large bully laugh. Naruto eyebrow twitched 3 times before he jumped at the boys and started to pounding the daylights out of what seemed to be a bigger kid. About 15 feet away, the small indigo hair girl with a set of beautiful lavender eyes stopped cry and looked at the boy that stood up for her, but winced at the fight, and the blonde wasn't doing too good. How do you like being picked on, jerk? The blonde boy shouted to the big kid as and puck him, only to be thrown down and kicked by the others. I don't hear y'all laughing now, y'all big bully. Next scene shows the blonde boy bruise with black eye but stand over the 3 bullies. I'll get you back for this, Uzumaki. As the kid ran off, the blonde boy stood there breathing heavily, trough his nose. He noticed that his nose was bleeding from when the big kid got his shots in. He wondered whether he should go after the kid or not, but seeing the girl looking at him, he decided to stay. He grabbed her ball, which apparently the bigger kid took. Don't cry, I chased him away, said the boy, sniffing, trying to stop the blood flow of his nose. The girl slowly raised her head to see the blonde boy smiling. The boy then knelt to her level. What's your name, right? The girl's tears began to dry. Hinata. Hinata Hyuga. The boy just smiled with his trademark goofy grin. I got your ball back, Hinata, he said, presenting the ball to her. She began to smile as she took the ball. However, they both noticed right away that the ball had blood on it from the boy's nosebleed. Having an embarrassed look on his face, the boy grabbed the bottom of his shirt. Sorry about that, here, I'll get it off. As he was doing so, the girl spoke up. What is your name? She said in a shy fashion. Me? I'm Naruto Uzumaki. He helped the girl up. The two looked at each other for a minute. She was looking into his cerulean eyes, and he was looking into her big beautiful lavender ones. Suddenly their stare was broken when a large hand grabbed Naruto by the back of his collar. What the hell do you think you're doing here, punk? A man shouted as he ripped Naruto away from Hinata, throwing the boy to the ground. The man, who had some buddies with him, turned to see who the girl was. Lady Hinata, he said. They all also noticed that she had tears on her face. They then turned enraged to Naruto. You little bastard, how dare you assault Lady Hinata? One of the men said. Suddenly all the men started to beat on the boy. He put his arms up to guard his head, however, it did not do much good as one of the men was stomping away at it. Hinata grabbed the pants of one of the men. Stop, he was helping me, Hinata said, but the men did not take time to listen. Hinata's tears started up again as she was trying to stop the pummeling of her new friend. Stop, said a deep commanding voice. The men turned to see that Hiyashi Hyuga was coming up to them. Lord Hiyashi, one of the men said, bowing. Hinata, said Hiyashi as he ran to pick her up. You had me scared to death, you know you were not supposed to wander off. Hinata was not even listening to her father as she was trying to look through the men to see if Naruto is okay. What is going on here? Hiyashi demanded. Lord, we saw this animal attacking Lady Hinata, one of the men said. Hinata was trying to tell everyone what happened, but nobody was listening. Hiyashi took a few steps forward to see the boy. Naruto? Hiyashi thought to himself. Hinata began to cry as she saw that Naruto had been completely battered. Despite his numerous injuries, Naruto brought himself to his feet. What shocked Hiyashi was that a 5-year-old, after having taken such a beating, did not shed a single tear. Boy, Hiyashi started. Naruto looked up at him, still breathing heavy. Come with me. The boy, and everybody else, looked shocked, but he simply turned found while Hinata watched. That was the Naruto met Hinata and Hiyashi, who did all they could for the boy. End of dream, flashback. Hinata let out a soft moan as she woke up. She was in a large bed. Looking up, she saw that Naruto was sitting across from her. His metallic arm and eye was in full view. Naruto raised his hand to stop her from speaking. I know what you're going to ask, and I know how much it must have hurt you, and I'm sorry, Naruto sighed. As you can see, I did lose my right arm and eye. I'm alive only because Azure saved me. The cybernetic blonde waved his hand and Azure appeared to his right. And before you ask, let me tell you her story. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, there was a race of aliens, people who weren't human. They were far older than our kind, and for that they were called the Elders. The elders traveled the universe looking for knowledge, but one day they came upon a dead world with a great darkness seal inside it. They were curious and unsealed it, believing that their knowledge and power would be able to stop it. They were wrought. The elders and the abyss fought each other for eons. Finally the elders made one last attack to end the darkness. They found themselves on this world and settled down for a time, but they learned that the abyss had survived, and so they created a great guardian. The two fought, and as the abyss near its defeat it fused with the guardian. The guardian became a being of chaos, and so with the last of their power the elders split it into 9 pieces. That would become the Biju. Hinata's eyes widen at this information. But what does this have to do with you or why you got hurt? Naruto looked down. Before all the elders died away they had a visage that the darkness would come back a third and final time, and that the one born to the 9th piece would be destined to stop it. Born to the 9th piece? The pale eye girl echoed, not liking where this going. Naruto smiled sadly. Hinata, do you know what a Jinchuriki is? Of course she knew what a Jinchuriki was. As the heiress of the Hyuga clan she knew all of the major powers in the shinobi world and opened her mouth to tell him that when the truth hit her and tears came to her eyes. It all makes sense now, all the hate and glares, and of course the Hokage make a law to stop people from talking about it. That's why father couldn't tell me. But why Naruto? Most Jinchuriki are normally related to their cage. The Hyuga heiress froze as she suddenly remembered seeing a photo her father had of the 4th. At the time she was surprised by how much he looked like Naruto. Now she realized that it was Naruto that looked like him, and knew why. Naruto, why your father? Hinata tried to said. I know, Hinata-chan. Azure told me. Naruto said softly, and an uneasy silence fell over then for a few moments before Azure spoke up. I know that this is a lot of data to take in and that you are as processing Hinata same. But if you stay much longer the risk of your father of one of the Hyuga elders finding you missing goes over 45%. The Hyuga heiress jumped as if she was shocked. What if I get caught? What will I do? What will I say? She was on the verge of fainting before Azure stopped her. Nebi-san will escort you home. If anyone asks you where you were picking flowers for my master's grave. Hinata nodded silently and followed the purple hair woman. The trip back was uneventful. The transporter rings weren't as bad, and the woman shinned them through the forest. The Hyuga heiress got to her room with no problem. The guards outside the compound barely looked at her. And as she lay on her bed one thought echo in her head, what happens now? Location: Konoha. Date: NA November 17, 10:12, 1 p.m. 2 months have passed since the village of Konoha believed the Naruto Uzumaki died, and a change had come over it. To an outsider it might not be obvious, but for the people living in the village a feeling of gloom had settled over the once joyful place. This came from Naruto's heritage being leaked out, much to the horror of the shinobi and villagers. For the ninjas it was that they neglected and failed to protect the son of their greatest hero. But for the villagers it was that the other villages fought out how badly they treated him, and now both trade and missions were at an all-time low. But the people who knew Naruto were changed the most. The Hokage was colder and more serious. Kakashi was now mostly on time, only half an hour late, and Iruka lost most of his joy. The students were also changed. Sasuke was now ignoring everyone. Sakura was now quiet and distant. Shion was taking to people. Shikamaru now stayed awake during class, and Ino now took her training seriously. But the one to change the most was none other than Hinata Hyuga. After a week or two of depression she not only became happy again but she was more confident and outspoken. This shocked and bewildered almost everyone who knew her, and when they asked about this miraculous change she would simply said, Naruto-kun would have wanted me to never give up. Hinata was at the marketplace with a large basket half full of vegetable. She had just got a very good deal on a dark orange scarf and was planning to give to Naruto. She never was able to give him his birthday present. As she moved through the shops and stalls looking for things to buy she thought of how most things have changed for her since she found out that Naruto was alive. The first and foremost was the blonde's burden and prophecy. In some weird way it made her own burden lighter and smaller. Being a clan heir was nothing to being a Jinchuriki, and no matter how bad an heiress or ninja she was her responsibility was insignificant compared to his. The world was literally at stake. The second was her new teachers, Anko Mitarashi and Itachi Uchiha. When she first met him she was so terrified that she fainted and was incoherent for 10 minutes. After they calmed her down Itachi told her his story. Hinata cried for another 10 minutes and afterwards decided that he was a true shinobi and hero. Anko on the other hand was a shock to her, loud and bold. She had a level of confidence that the Hyuga heiress could only dream of having one day, but what really surprised her was that the purple hair women had an almost sisterly friendship with Naruto. Last but not least was Azure. Hinata was absolutely fascinated the artificial intelligence and the unworldly knowledge she has. The indigo hair girl was most interested in the advanced technology, like the nanites that help save Naruto's life or the cybernetics used to replace his lost arm and eye. Hinata froze as she caught a glance of something in a pile of cheap jewelry. Stepping closer to the stall she saw that it was a pair of bands made of dark blue metal. The Hyuga heiress was able to hit almost all of her surprise. Her father would be proud of her. The stallholder looked like some kind of ancient goblin, bald and shriveled with beady green eyes. "My name is Yoku. How can I help you, young lady? How much are those bracelets over there?" She gave a small wave, one that made her look curious but not too interested. A look of greed sparked in the stallholder eyes. "Ah, you have a fine eye there. Those bracelets were made in the land of iron for a young noble in the Landwater. I will sell them to you, young lady, for 100 ryo. Hinata had a harder time hiding her disgust at the stallholder's greed. It was obvious he knew nothing of bands' history or value. They probably were made in the land of iron but most likely for a high-ranking samurai. She made a show of slowly look back down at the bracelets. They were made of chakra-conducing metal and worth at least 5 times what the stallholder wanted. "Thank you, Yoku, I would love to buy those bracelets from you." After handing him the money, Hinata slowly turned and walked away. She could feel the man's beady eyes follow her down the road. Having spent most of her money, she decided to visit Naruto. She haven't seen him in a few days and she could give him his scarf. Hinata quickly made her way to Forest of Death. Anko had shown her the 3 safe paths that lead through to the tower. "Good morning, Hinata-san. You came to see Naruto?" Azure asked as Hinata stopped in the ring room. "Yes, Azure-san. How is he?" "My master is currently training with Anko. Do you want to see him now?" "Yes, please," Hinata said as she stepped into the center of the rings and disappeared. Hinata reappeared in Naruto's room, and sighed at the mess of cloths and instant ramen that Anko smuggled in for the blonde knucklehead. Looking around and no seeing said blonde, Hinata walked down the left hallway. It really surprised her just how large this place was. At the 4th door she heard the sound of laughter and swearing. Opening the door, Hinata saw a amused Anko standing over a frustrated Naruto with knuckles and a target dummy scatter around them. Ever since the operation, Naruto's aim been terrible. Thought to be fair, it was never that good to begin with. The reason for this was because the bionic blonde's new arm was a lot heavier and that weight throw off his balance. The purple hair Kunoichi finally stopped laughing and picked up and handed the scowling Jinchuriki 3 the fallen knuckles. Again, Gaki. Naruto glared at her before taking a calming breath and quickly launching the small weapons. The first 2 missed completely and the third hit the dummy in the shoulder but bounced off. Anko started to laugh again. Naruto, who looked like he was about to say something rude and or childish, froze as he saw the indigo hair girl and turned red instead. "Ah, if isn't her favorite Hyuga princess. Now what do we have here?" Anko said as she walked over and snatched the orange scarf from the basket. "It's a gift for Naruto-kun. I wasn't able to give him a birthday present." The pale-eyed girl mumbled the last part as she saw Naruto grinning at her from ear to ear and turned bright red. "Well, he won't be getting it anytime soon, unless he can hit that target." The snake summoner grinned evilly. "What?" both preteens yelled in shock before the Naruto glared at Anko. "But I just hit that stupid target." "Ah, but it bounced off, so that don't count." The purple hair woman shook her head and before anyone could said something else shunshin away. "You know that there's no stopping her when she gets like this," Akane whispered from Naruto's mind. Sighing because he knew she was right, Naruto turned to his shy friend and mumbled, "Do you think that you can stay for a while and help me?" "Oh, okay. Naruto-kun." Hinata nodded before turning bright red as she realized she would be all alone with Naruto, and completely forgetting that Azure was watching their every move. So for the next hour the Hyuga heiress showed the last Uzumaki how to hold and throw the kunal before he was able to hit the target in the chest, and because Anko wasn't back and Azure told them that she had left the forest, the 2 adolescents moved on to taijutsu. Naruto had just tripped Hinata, who fell on top of him when Anko walks into the room eating a dango with Itachi behind her. The raven summoner raised an eyebrow at the two while the purple-haired Kunoichi grinned evilly. Well, who knew the Hyuga princess would be so quick to go in for the kill. Hinata turned a brilliant crimson and jumped off of Naruto in a blink of an eye. Anko laughed at the blonde's confused face before becoming serious. Well Gaki, you did well in your training and Azure thinks you're ready for your next lesson. Naruto and Hinata turned pale. This could not be good. What is my next lesson? The young blonde asked nervously. The snake summoner grin turned sinister. Well, we have 1 month to prepare you for your great challenge, and then, you go back to school. Location: unknown. Date: unknown. A dark figure slowly rose out of the ground, wrapped in a ragged black cloak. I was not a man but a terrifying plant-like creature. Half of it was black and the other half white and had Venus flytrap-like extensions that emerged from its sides, enveloping the creature's head and upper body. The most disturbing thing was the large amount of blood running down the creature's mouth and neck. On the ground next to the plant-like monster was an unconscious man with scars cover one side of his face, and bound in chains. Those seals were a bitch to get through, the black and white being said to himself. Yeah, but the guards were tasty. They were in an underground room with 3 coffins. The creature walked to the last one, which strangely had the kanji for 4th on it. As it studied the seals on the coffin, the man on the floor woke up. The scared man struggled to get free for a few moments before the plant-like monster spoke up. You can stop wasting your time trying to escape, Obito Uchiha. The man stopped struggling and glared at the black and white creature. How could you betray me, Zetsu, and how are you stopping me from using my Sharingan? Zetsu seemed to chuckle before the white half spoke. You Yukiya all think you're so invincible with your mutate pink eye. All I did was injected you with a mild neurotoxin which is temporarily relaxing the blood vessels and tenketsu around your eyes. You and Madara never were my masters, only puppets to be used for his resurrection, and now it is time. All the pieces have come together. The plant man ripped open the coffin, ignoring the dozen or so kernels that embedded themselves in its chest. Inside was the almost perfectly preserved body of Minato Namikaze, the 4th Hokage. Zetsu tore the shirt off the corpse to reveal the dead demon-consuming seal. Grinning, he took out 2 vials of blood from his cloak and poured them over the seal before impaling it with his right hand. For a moment nothing moved, and then BOOM. The room was enveloped in a roaring inferno of black, purple, and red energy. Slowly it condensed into a black figure outlined in violet flames with a single red eye. Looking around, the fiery being eye fell on the black and white creature. Is time, Zetsu, as Azure Final made her move. Then it has begun. Ah, I see you had a body for me. Obito Uchiha has the dark being envelop him. A few moments later, in Obito place stood a tall man with dark tan skin. He had 3 whiskers on each cheek, long spiky black hair with red highlights, and his eyes were the red orbs of the Sharingan. We have work to do, my servant, follower to gather, lives to destroy, but first you must tell me of his world. Yes, master, Zetsu nodded. What should I call you, master? The shadow man paused. Call me Zero. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.